What's up, guys? I'm Alex with BFE Adventures, and today I'm going to discuss what kind of motorcycle you should actually buy. Stay tuned. All right, guys, so let's discuss a couple things here. Not everybody needs a big old bike like this. Okay, so here we have my two main steeds in the stable. Okay, as you can tell, I just rode this one today and it is an absolute muddy mess, but that's the winter in Southern Illinois. So I wanted to compare these two a little bit lightly, but also to explain to you what kind of bike you really need. So this is geared towards somebody that's just looking at getting into the segment, whether you came from, I'm going to give you a little bit of examples from like three main types of people that I see come into the adventure bike category. One, a newbie straight out of your motorcycle safety course and you're looking at getting into adventure riding. Two, you got the street guy, the dedicated street bike guy that's deciding he's going to get off road. And then the third one would be the guy that used to race motocross whenever he was a kid, and now he's getting back into motorcycle riding, and he's decided he wants to do, or they decide that they want to get into adventure bike stuff and they used to ride a long time ago. Okay, so let's discuss it for those people. So first off, if you're a beginner, there's two different ways that most beginners come into the segment. One, you think you need way more bike than you really do, or it's somebody that's timid. You know, they're trying to start small but they don't want to get something too small. And then the other person is they think they need the biggest, baddest, fastest thing. And honestly, I see that most in the guys coming from street bikes than I do with the beginners. So let's discuss this. I have been riding motorcycles for over 20 years. And this is a little Yamaha 250 that has less than 30 horsepower. And I absolutely love this bike. Okay, so just because you're a beginner, do not think that this bike is not enough for you, because I'm willing to bet that that is not true. I have also had plenty of crotch rockets, and I've had two naked bikes, and I don't even know how many different big adventure bikes at this point. And I can tell you that not everybody needs one of these, but this is also a buttload of fun, even after the high horsepower stuff. So for all of you street guys coming over, you don't need something like this if you're never going to go on a big road trip. So what should you be looking at? So those of you, the guys that fall into the category of used to ride dirt bikes whenever they were kids, and then they kind of hem-hawed around in and out of the Harley game or something like that, and now they're coming back into it. You guys are a special breed, because most often the people that we ride with that have done that, they tend to be way better, more proficient riders than we expected. And that's because off-road riding is totally different than street riding. And so trying to jump back and forth between the two, in my opinion, it's much easier to come from a dirt background and ride street than it is to be coming from a street background and ride dirt. So going from a low traction environment to a high traction environment, you just learn very quickly that you just lean the bike differently and know that there's always traction on the street. Whereas when you're coming from the street, trying to move a bike around like this in a low traction environment is sketchy skittles the first couple times you do it. And so if you're coming from a dirt background, then you may potentially be able to look at something with a little more pep. Okay, let's just say that. So let's talk about different categories of stuff. So this is an Africa Twin. I do not have a GS sitting here. That would be like the bigger one here. And I don't have like a T7 or a 798-90 sitting right here to be kind of in between these two. But I do have two decent ends of the spectrum. So what you really need to do is be honest with yourself of how and where you're going to be riding. If most of your riding is within 2 hours of you and you never plan on going on a long road trip, then honestly, I would not even consider something this big unless you want to remain street biased and then occasionally ride gravel roads, or you want to go down a dirt road to your buddy's bonfire or something. Then this would be something you could look at. But if you do plan to ride a moderate amount of off-road, then I would honestly not even look at something this big, okay? If if it's relatively close, I would be looking at a T7, Husky 701, KTM 690, something like that. Pardon me. Or something smaller like the high performance dual sports or the more low maintenance reliable dual sports. So some things to consider with those. If you're going to be running highway, even for a half hour each way to go somewhere that you're going to be doing that often, then I would be looking more in the middle range category, like an 890, 790, 901. Obviously, I like all those bikes because I keep saying those. The Tenere 700, Honda CB500X, that's a little more street bias, but we use them off-road all the time. Love them. So that's something that would fall in this hole, okay? I don't have the CBs in the garage, so I'd put one in there. Anyway, if you're planning on doing, let's say, 2 to 3 annual trips that you're going to be gone for a week, then these are the bikes you should get, okay? If you want the adrenaline of cranking the throttle on the street and really ripping up to 60, 70 miles an hour, then you should get something from the middleweight category and up, okay? But don't kid yourself and think that you're going to get a GS and ride it like anyone that could in one of these two categories. It's just not going to happen. I would consider myself a pretty decent rider, and there's no way. I mean, I've ridden before with guys on 690s and 450s, like the Honda CRF 450L on my Africa Twin, and it wore me out trying to keep up with them all day. And on single track, there was no way I was going to keep up with them. On 2-track and that kind of stuff, yeah, I could keep up, but it was exhausting. By like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was toast. I was ready to go home. So if you're primarily keeping it to roads that I would say you can reasonably go 30 miles an hour on or higher, then you could stay in the middleweight and above category. If you're going to be, 50-50 even in the woods, then you need to look at this category and less. And don't get so worried about the horsepower unless you want to drag race the thing. But I don't know. I'm in my 30s now. That's not that old, but in my opinion, I just don't really care if I have the fastest bike anymore. In my 20s, that would have been a different story, but now I just don't care. When we were riding and Pogo's got his 1190 and he can just burp up a wheelie at 55 miles an hour, that's pretty cool. But I don't care that much to have that much power anymore. But that doesn't mean the KTM 1290 is not appealing to me. So don't even let me lie to you there. Anyway, I have this Africa Twin, for example. This is like one of the lowest horsepower big bikes that there is. And I absolutely love it because every time I come out here and hit the starter, it starts, period. Like it just runs. And this thing has almost 30,000 miles on it now. It's got over 30,000 miles on it. There's no squeaks, no rattles, no nothing. It rides like a brand spanking new bike. This has aftermarket suspension on it, and it's incredible. This is just an incredible all-arounder. And so for me, to give you an idea of, I don't like talking specs of bikes because I just get too long-winded, and honestly, I don't research them enough to know the details. So I just know how they feel by riding them. And I can tell you, anything around here that I'm only going to be gone for a couple hours tops, I'm taking this every time instead of this one. Unless it's really cold out, then I'm taking this because it's got wind protection, it's got heated grips, it's got blah, 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 blah. It's got all the fun stuff for staying warm. In the summertime or anything in the woods that is going to be aggressive, I'm taking this thing. And if you can't have one of each, then that's where you would be looking at a middle lane bike, okay? So based off what I'm telling you, if you can only have one bike in the garage, then that's when you should heavily consider, and you're not going on a big trip and you don't care about running 100 plus miles an hour all the time, that's really where you should heavily consider these middleweight categories, like a KLR 650 or an XR 650 on the lower end of the horsepower, all the way up to like the KTM 890s, 901s, Nordens. That would be this category, okay? So if you're going on these bigger trips and you're going to be running highway at 80 miles an hour for hours, then I would lean on the higher side of these and up. Okay. If I could pick any bike to go to California and I was going to ride from Southern Illinois and I was going to ride, the Pacific Coast Highway, and then I was going to do some off-road stuff while I was out there, but, lighter stuff, I would pick a GS. Honestly, I loved that bike. I would gladly cruise all the way to California on it, and it would be fine. Anything that I'm only going to be gone 4 or 5 days, and let's say like our trips down to Tennessee and North Carolina, I would pick this because the off-road can sometimes be a little trickier than the GS likes, and the Africa Twin just eats it up compared to what the GS would. And like the 790, 890, they would be even more aggressive at doing that kind of stuff. But if you have a dirt, if your bike that you want to pick looks like a dirt bike, that's how it's going to feel on the road. Okay, so I think people have these, you see these YouTube videos of people with 250s and they kit them out in adventure style stuff and then they ride them all the way across the country. That is totally doable, and if you have the time frame to do that and you don't mind cruising 55 miles an hour or less on back roads all the time, then honestly, this would be a riot to take across the country. But I honestly don't have that kind of time. So between just running my businesses and stuff, I just don't have time for that. So I want to get to the riding that I'm going to do. And so I typically haul balls all the way there. So that's where this would come in. So I hope that kind of bridges the gap on some certain things. If you are coming from a street bike, know that none of these adventure bikes are going to be as fast as, a BMW 1000 RR, whatever. None of these are going to be as fast as a KTM 1290 Super Duke. Okay, the 1290 adventure bike is incredibly fast, and I can tell you that adventure bike would spank the pants off of just about any sport bike. Most of these will not do that. So if that's what you're wanting, then stick on the street, I guess. But I wouldn't want any of those kind of bikes off-road. Even all of those high-performance bikes, they all nowadays have off-road modes anyway that dumb them down to 100 horsepower. So just remember that. You don't need that high horsepower all the time. If you're one of the old guys coming in that used to ride dirt a long time ago, then one, kudos to you. And I would tell you, if you're going to ride aggressively off-road, then I can tell you eventually you're going to want to get this or smaller. So you may start on the GS, but you're always going to migrate down. It just seems to be the natural progression of things. And so you could probably save yourself a step if you're going between a GS and like a KTM 690, maybe you should kind of settle in the 890 range or something like that, because you're going to migrate down most likely, unless you're doing a lot of cross-country stuff. So anyway, these are 100% all of my opinions. I hope that gave you guys a little bit of insight as to where you should plant yourself with these bikes. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. The last thing I will say that I hear all the time as far as getting a bike of these magnitude, people like to orient their body size to what kind of bike they need, okay? Literally, all of that comes down to suspension, okay? This 250, whether you're 250 pounds or me, 170 pounds, or my buddy Pogo, 140 pounds, this bike is going to feel like a turd. It doesn't matter how heavy you are, period. It's not going to be a rocket ship. This bike doesn't care if you're 400 pounds or if you're 150 pounds. The only time you're going to notice it is when it's loaded down with gear. It's not going to feel as fast. Other than that, this has plenty of motor. On the KTM 1290, it doesn't care if you're 800 pounds. That thing is still going to try and throw you off the back of it when you twist the throttle. So people try and get these bikes and say, oh, well, I'm not maybe a good enough rider to ride an 890, but I don't think that 690 can handle my weight. I promise you that's not true. So go with your skill level and what you intend to do with the bike, not your weight or your size. The only time I would say size comes into play is when you're getting certain bikes that aren't geared or aren't set up a certain way. Like for example, we have a lot of CB500Xs that we use in our fleets for rental bikes. That bike is designed to be a smaller bike on purpose. It has a low seat height, so the seat to peg ratio is very short. So if you're a tall guy, a bike like that, you're gonna have to make some ergonomic rearrangements. And so like we put drop pegs on ours and stuff like that. So know that that will have to come into play ergonomically. But if you're looking at performance, none of that should be calculated on your size, in my opinion. Okay, it's just, that's a non-issue. You should be more worried about where your skill set level is and what you intend to do with the bike. Don't stick on what you're going to get based on your size, because I can tell you, if you're a big guy, let's say a 300-pound guy, and you decide to get a KTM 1290 because you think that you need that much power to haul your butt around, and you haven't ever ridden dirt ever, and you go and take a 150 horsepower motorcycle off-road and don't put it in off-road mode, you're gonna eat it hard. So just keep that in mind, and that is where I'll end it. So if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to ask me in the comments below, and I'd be happy to get back to you. And other than that, ride safe out there. Talk to you soon.